Okay, we all know this tune, right? If you're a singer, you do. Seems like everybody sings this song. Let's sing it once. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Alma decore spiritu dell'alma sempre costante adoro. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I want to just take a moment and look at, let's start with that first phrase. Where does the first phrase end?
Measure 4.
Good, measure 4. What kind of cadence happens there?
Half
Good, half cadence. Now, in terms of a Schenkerian analysis, what will you say also of that half cadence?
Interruption.
Interruption.
Yes,
Good.
involuntary.
Remember what happens at an interruption. It's very particular. Harmonically, what do you find?
And it's with 5.
5. Melodically, what do you find?
2.
The 2.
Scale degree 2. Good. Scale degree 2. Now, we want to figure out how we get there, because Schenker's about a process through time. Melodically, how do we get there? It's best to work from the end and go backwards. So if this...
Starts on half.
Where are we going to back up to? Say again, I didn't quite hear that.
Goes downward.
You have a...
G.
Can I go further?
Yes, A.
B.
And I'm going to go way back here because I can see that B way at the
That's
start.
very
At
sweet.
the front end. Okay, so I know I'm going to do this and stop there. That's my interruption sign, 2 vertical lines like that in parallel. There's my interruption. Okay, so notice where the descent mainly happens. You notice something going on here? 5 for a long time and then go ahead and say it, sir.
Phrase, right in the progression, the harmonic progression right there
At the end, yeah. So often the descent is pretty quick
Right.
and just sort of seals it off at the
It's like
end.
it delays, it's like here and then, boom.
Yeah, there's a big gap here, a
Yeah.
delay before you start the descent. Now, there's an initial descent to 1, but you know that's not done. Why is that true? Why is measure 2, despite its descending motion, not really an end?
An inversion is not strong.
Good. There's an inverted 1 there, 1/6. Let's get a little bit more detail in here. So here's my 1, and it moves up to a G sharp there. And up top, where that happens, I need a big line down here. But we're not deeming a single note in there because the harmony here is more of 1, but in first inversion.
There's no tonal motion, just is there.
Oh, there is,
Oh, a
yeah,
little
yeah, you're right. There's this kind of motion,
Yeah,
spinning your
yeah.
wheels, but no advancing the
Right.
progression. Good point. Yeah. Let's get a couple more notes in here too. See, I need to line the A up with this F sharp in the bass. So we've got passing motion here, and in Schenkerian notation, you don't even need the P there. When you see them slur between 2 other things and the notes stepwise between, it's passing. And so I don't even need to write that.
Do you want the C on there too?
C? Oh, you mean yeah, in the next, going on,
Yeah.
we're gonna need that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and fill in some of this here. See the A and that, here. Okay, now, before we get into Schenkerian reading of this thing, in a lot of detail, you see what I'm doing? Bigger note values, why?
Because it's showing it's highlighting the importance of the tones.
Oh,
The
the
tone.
fundamental structure.
Yeah.
Of the fundamental structure. The bass arpeggiation, we're going up, but we don't get back down, so we just have part of that arpeggiation because it's interrupted. But yeah, we're gonna highlight those main notes at the background level. Okay, now, some interesting things happen in your interpretation here. what did you do with these?
Those
See.
are not-
Let me see. Lamprine, what did you do? I'm just gonna read. Okay, here's what Lamprine has. She has this. Good. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
It says there's a progression here, but what are these doing there?
That shows that it's not complete.
It's not in the key.
It's not, wait, it's not the,
It doesn't cadence.
there's no cadence there. We've said why this isn't really motion away from tonic. Sarah told us about that. Good. Now we do have predominant, dominant, tonic, all these elements, but you're saying not a cadence, why not? If I've got dominant and tonic, why don't I have an authentic cadence here?
Because the phrase doesn't end here. It
That's
ends
true.
with the.
Can you tell me why though? Why is this not really working as the dominant that brings closure when you arrive on it?
Because it's not a, it's a secondary, it's a secondary chord.
Yeah, it's not a
It's
primary.
incomplete.
It's not
It's a s-
stable.
Less stable?
Less stable.
Good. When you use a substitute for the dominant, a secondary chord, a substitute,
Mhm. Yeah.
7 is a substitute, that
For dominant.
takes away from its effect.
Mhm.
If you have a tonic at the end that's not a 1 chord, the primary
Mhm.
function bearing tonic, and you substitute in something else, whether it be 3 or 6,
Mhm.
if you go 5 to 6, that's still a tonic, but it's a tonic substitute. We have a special name for that. What is it? Deceptive motion. So 5 to 6, yeah, that can absorb the energy, so to speak, of the dominant, but it's not quite right either, and you
It's not the
know
dominant.
you're not done. Here too, we're plugging in a substitute for the dominant. It's unstable. Good. It's an inversion. 7s just aren't as stable as a 5 chord with its major sound and root position status. It's unstable. So when you move to tonic, it doesn't have the same effect. You know, that idea of going to the curb, putting the garbage out and coming back home. You haven't really gone that far, so it's not a big deal when you come back again, because you haven't really gotten away. But if you go to Japan and come home, it's a big deal, you know? Then the arrival back is significant. This did not get very far away. It was neighboring there. So some people had another interpretation. This is great, that's fine, it's good. There's another, and this really helps. The parentheses show that this is, yes, it's a progression, but it doesn't form the end of a phrase. It's parenthetical to the bigger picture. It's embedded. We call that an embedded progression. Embedded within the context of thinking bigger. Does not bring closure. So that's good, but now let's look at it another way. Somebody do it a different way?
Did it that way?
I had two, I should that way, but I also should them both as incomplete measures.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
That's how I showed it.
Good, okay. So here's another way.
Put it on there.
So the 4 is a neighbor to what?
And to the G sharp.
Good, so that's tacked on there. And the F sharp?
To the E.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then we can do this to clarify, to match this line. So it's kind of nice to know how to deal with harmonic function, because it sort of is a good launching place for understanding and your grasp on Schenkerian analysis. Do you see the connection there? If we're saying that the car is not really going anywhere yet, and it's just kind of spinning its wheels here, you're still on tonic. Yeah, there's motion, but you're not progressing. And then you get to the end and okay, now you really advance somewhere. Your wheels get traction and you move. The whole vehicle moves, not just the wheels, but you would really advance and go somewhere. This helps really show that, doesn't it? Now, when we get that idea of motion without really progressing anywhere, we can see how that slur says the same thing. It says, I'm taking this tonic chord and I'm seeing it as played out over time. And how? Well, these slurs help us see that these are neighboring other things. This is a neighbor to that. If you want to really clarify it, you can do this to show that these are main things. Put the stem on there, and you've just elevated it and shown it to be more stable than the things without stems. So now you can really see that this, because of the slur, is a neighbor to that. Now if I didn't have the stem, maybe that's the neighbor to that, right? You wouldn't know which one is embellishing which. Actually, it is because of the slur, but just work with me here a little bit. I could have stemmed that, and then this would be the neighbor, right? But we don't mean that. We want this one to pop out as more stable, and this one to resolve to it, and so we use the stem to highlight the more stable thing out of the pair.
Would the slurs change if we had labeled them as, in parentheses, predominant, dominant, tonic? Would that change at all?
We could try to do something different there. There are other options. Like we could say that this is, if we want to say that this is prominent, I'm going out on a limb here, I don't know how well this is going to work. Maybe you could say, okay, this is important, and I'm going to try and connect these together like that. Would that work? And view it all as somehow these related to one another, and then resolve here? That seems a little funky though. Maybe I need to try and pull the 4 into the orbit of this guy.
Yeah, that's what I did.
That could work too. I could work with that. And then this becomes, so it would be possible, is this what you have? Anybody do this? I think somebody did. Again for that. Abby.
I did put passing there.
That would be more consonant with this idea of making this predominant, dominant, tonic thing happen in there. So those two are kind of a nice match with one another. Charity, did you have something you wanted to?
Oh, I just said I did make the 7 chord passing.
In
chord
between here?
there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that works. That works too. There are many ways of going at it, but I think I'm going to highlight this one because I don't know, I like the other one too. I'm not going to take a stand on that. I'm going to say they're both cool and they both reveal different aspects of that progression. For 7 1. Okay, some interesting things going on there. Any comments that you'd like to make or questions before we leave just the base part of this? Yeah, Sarah.
Maybe I read this wrong, but when we stem, for instance, if we were to show importance between the embellishings there, is it happen often on the strong and the strong beats typically of the measure?
I wouldn't really use strong beat as a determining factor.
Okay.
It can play a role in your decision-making process, but it's got to take a backseat to other things. Suspensions are the prime example of this. Suspension is in a strong metrical position by definition. Pagituras, there are certain things, certain kinds of embellishing tones that are in that strong metrical position. But we know that those are embellishing because they're so unstable. So the instability, for whatever reason, is going to trump the metrical placement.
Okay.
So it needs to, it can play a role, but it needs to be
Okay.
way down here in my priority list.
Okay.
I want the most stable thing. Now, metrical placement, if you got two things that are fairly stable, it might tip the balance. And you might go with the one that's on the downbeat rather than the one that's off, you know?
Right.
So there it can play a role, but it's down here, and other things are more likely to determine your interpretation of stability than metrical placement. All right, here's the same note coming back with the same harmony, so I'm just going to use the slur now, not to show that one note belongs to another as an incomplete neighbor, but I'm going to say that that's the same note coming back. They belong together because they both belong to the E major tonic triad. I can do the same here then, can't I? They both belong to that same triad. And then I'm going to do this. You see the match then?
Yeah.
Passing motion, parallel up. usually you want to make as much of a match between the outer parts as you can. You're interested in the counterpoint between the bass motion and the main melody's motion. All right, now the chord change happens here, so that's something new. But all this, what am I going to do with this motion down?
To G and then to E.
G and then to E. Good. They all belong to that same triad. Passing tones, I don't need to mark. In Schenkerian notation, that's a given. Those are passing tones. All right, now what are we going to do with this note?
Group it together with the A.
We could try and do that. Then we'd be doing kind of like what we did before, where we were trying to relate this as some way of unpacking this chord, because we know that that's part of the chord, so we try and group these together and work with that. We could go in that direction, but since we've got this down there, can you make a better match? Think, okay, I want a counterpoint to this. Can I make this match? Can I make this match the interpretation down here a little better? This was an incomplete neighbor to that. Can you do something similar? C sharp relates to
A.
or.
E.
You could try going to the B, yeah, back here and say, this is an incomplete neighbor. You see what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make it look on a par with this, so I'm not going to use a quarter. Use an eighth, and that's pretty normal for neighbor. This is an incomplete neighbor to the B's before, so it's like an escape tone-ish. It's not a strong metrical position though. But incomplete neighbor to the B. That works and it matches this interpretation pretty well. Okay, so it's kind of an aside, the version of the melody in a new direction, and then we start the real descent of tones. And these guys are pretty simple. There's nothing extra, is there?
No,
Oh, there is.
we're gonna just have some escape.
Okay, what do we do with the, good, escape tones? What do we do with those?
Those you connect it as well with a slur, so the one that it's, comes through.
Which way should I connect?
Well, you connect it to the A to the B.
Good, there you go. A to the G sharp. Escape tones, so these are incomplete neighbors to the note preceding. Incomplete neighbor to the note preceding. You're done. Okay, so that's a Schenkerian way of capturing what you've done very nicely on your sheet, and to do with harmonic function. We're taking harmonic function analysis and using it as a springboard for making our Schenkerian analysis.